So, hello everyone. So for me, it's a pleasure to present you our host for this closure event. So Joshua is the founder of the popular YouTube channel StatQUest. StatQUest has over 400,000 followers and more than 100 videos, in which Josh explains the most difficult topics in statistics, machine learning, and data science in a very entertaining and understandable way. Josh works as adjunct professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, developing statistical and data visualization methods for sequence analysis. Josh also shares his passion for teaching with his passion for music, so he's a composer and musical performer. Joshua, thank you for accepting our invitation to this closing event, and we are eager to learn from your experience what would be the best advice to do and not to do in data science. I will let you to share your screen.
Thank you very much. So let me share my screen. There we go. And I'm going to talk about 3 things to do when starting out in data science. But first, I have to start with a silly song. So congratulations, you just finished 100 days of data trek. Congratulations, congratulations, hooray. Bam. All right, so today we're going to talk about 3 things to do when starting out in a career in data science. So thing number 1, be curious about the data. In data science or bioinformatics or statistics or machine learning or whatever, we work with a lot of data. For example, we might have clinical trial data, or we might get data from a research lab, or we might get data about how people interact with a website, or we might get sensors at a weather station, or from community polls or political polls, community surveys, or any other source. The possibilities are endless. Given that, regardless of the source, data usually consists of numbers and words in a spreadsheet. It is tempting to think that is all there is to data. It's just a bunch of stuff in a spreadsheet. But data does not just magically appear in a spreadsheet. It has to be collected, usually by people, from a source, which is usually other people. And anything that involves people tends to be more interesting than the numbers in a spreadsheet might suggest. For example, maybe we are studying lung cancer, and this person has lung cancer. And we isolate a bunch of cells from the tumor, and then we get measurements from each cell. What can we learn from this data? Well, that depends. First, we need to know about this person. Do they smoke? Are they old or young? Do they have a racial or ethnic identity? The answers to these questions give us context for the data and limit what we can extrapolate from it. If this person smokes, then we may need to restrict our conclusions to smokers. If this person is young, we may need to restrict our conclusions to young people. And we may need to restrict our conclusions to a specific racial or ethnic identity. And there are a ton of other factors that narrow the scope of our conclusions. People often talk about bias in analytics, and this is where a lot of the bias can occur. For example, if we only collected lung cancer samples from white males, then our results may not apply to the majority of the population. So it's super important to know about the source of the data. Now, what do we know about the person who extracted the cells? Were they an expert who extracted lung cancer cells a million times? Or was this their first time? The answers to these questions suggest how pure or contaminated the sample is. If we believe the sample is contaminated, we may have less confidence in the results. So it's important to know how the samples were handled. Lastly, who prepared this table? Were they an expert or was this their first time? If it was their first time, did they do it right? If not, the data we input to our analysis algorithms may not be what we think it is. So it's super important to know how the data were processed. So we see that at every step of the way, there's a person that influences the data and ultimately how the data should be interpreted. So my advice is to go to the clinic and meet the patients. You may notice something about them that no one else noticed. Then meet the people collecting the cells. If you're lucky, they may let you observe the process. Again, this gives you a chance to notice things that other people who are not focused on the analysis might miss. Lastly, meet the people who create the dataset to learn what they do. This gives you a chance to validate the assumptions you have about the data. In the end, we see that data isn't just data. It's not just numbers and words in a spreadsheet. Instead, it is a process, and each step in the process influences how the numbers and words in the spreadsheet should be interpreted. So maybe instead of calling it data science, we should call it people science. Because it's as much about understanding people and what they do as it is about the data. So, in summary of this first point, be curious about the data. Bam! Okay, here's thing number 2. Be curious about the methods. Data science or bioinformatics or whatever is chock full of methods. We've got statistics, we've got machine learning, and we've got database techniques. This is a blessing because we have a lot of tools to use. But it is also a curse because it takes time to keep up with them all. However, it's important to keep up with the methods in order to understand their limitations. Here's an example. When I made the StatQuest on neural networks, I started with a really simple data set that showed whether or not drug dosages were effective against a virus. The low and high dosages were not effective, but the medium dosage was effective. Then I fit a neural network to this data and got this green squiggle. And the green squiggle fits the data pretty well. When the dosage is low, the green squiggle is close to 0, and the neural network predicts that the drug is not effective. And that is consistent with the data we use to train the neural network. When the dosage is 0.5, the green squiggle is close to 1, and the neural network predicts that the drug would be effective. And this prediction is also consistent with the data we use to train the neural network. Lastly, when the dosage is high, the green squiggle is close to 0, and the neural network predicts that the drug would not be effective. And that, too, is consistent with the data we use to train the neural network. So we see that the green squiggle fits the 3 points in the training dataset pretty well. But let's be honest, this bump looks a little weird. If you asked me to fit a squiggle to the data, I might fit a nice arc like this. This arc makes sense to me because the output values are between 0 and 1, just like the original data. But the neural network did not fit an arc to the data. Instead, the neural network fit a green squiggle that had this weird bump that goes over 1. And the training data never went over 1. So where does this weird bump come from? Well, if we knew how neural networks worked, we would know that the green squiggle is only penalized where there is data. In other words, the neural network will be penalized if the green squiggle is far from these points. And as a result, the green squiggle is close to all 3 points. However, the green squiggle is not penalized where there is no data. And as a result, the green squiggle can do whatever it wants between the points. So, because of how neural networks are randomly initialized, I ended up with this bump. But I could have just as easily ended up with a neural network that had a bigger bump, or even 2 bumps, or whatever. The point I'm trying to make is that just because it makes more sense to us to fit a nice arc to the data like this, it doesn't mean the neural network won't fit something crazy like this instead. And that means it can be hard to trust the output from a neural network that is making predictions between data points. I think about these in-between data predictions whenever someone talks about using a neural network to drive a car. People are very good at extrapolating between experiences in a way that other people can relate to. In contrast, neural networks do whatever they want between experiences, and other drivers may not relate to that. And that's just one example of why knowing how the method works can be important. So be curious about how the methods work. Double bam! Now here's thing number 3. Just be curious. What we do in data science or bioinformatics or whatever is usually a small but super important piece of a much larger puzzle. We aren't just plugging in data and hitting return, but we are also helping cure diseases. We're helping lift people out of poverty. We're bringing smiles to people's faces. We're helping people in new and exciting ways. And I believe it is important to see the big picture. Our work does not exist in a cave, but is always in the service of people. And we should always be aware of how our work is used. Is our work being used to make the world a better place? Or not? The only way to find out is to be curious about the other pieces and figure out what they do and see the big picture. And I can't show that big picture to you because whatever you do is going to be different from what I do. So you have to find it yourself. So be curious. Triple bam. All right. Well, that's it for my little talk.
Thank you so much. Very, very nice. Thank you. I think we are very happy to hear this.